Please be aware that the information you are about to receive is presented not merely as a rumor or speculative idea, nor as a conspiracy theory circulating on social media. It is described as a real development poised to challenge fundamental assumptions about immigration, global power dynamics, and Africa's influence on America's future. The United States is reportedly preparing to announce a significant policy change in 2025. This change is characterized as unexpected, bold, and politically contentious, potentially dividing the country significantly. Specifically, the United States is said to be preparing to offer visa-free access to 10 African countries. For many years, African travelers, including students, workers, and diplomats, have often faced one of the most demanding, sometimes perceived as humiliating, and costly visa application processes to enter the United States. This process typically involves background checks, fingerprinting, interviews, and occasional unexplained denials. The system has long been regarded by many as flawed. However, proponents suggest that this could change in 2025 due to a proposed U.S. Global Mobility Plan. Under this initiative, citizens from 10 designated African countries could potentially travel to the U.S. without requiring a visa. This would eliminate the need for long waits at consulates and complex application forms, requiring only a passport and a plane ticket for entry. While this may seem improbable, the selection of countries and the alleged rationale behind their inclusion are presented as reasons why this policy could generate global controversy. Before exploring the details, viewers are encouraged to engage by liking, subscribing, and commenting on their own airport experiences. Let's examine the countries allegedly included. Number 10, Nigeria. It is suggested that Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, most populous nation, and a significant cultural force, will be included, despite historically facing stringent U.S. visa restrictions. Nigerians, often highly educated, English-speaking, and technologically adept, have reportedly experienced high visa rejection rates. Bureaucratic hurdles and perceived suspicion have been ongoing challenges. The narrative posits that this changes in 2025 because the U.S. now views Nigeria as a strategic partner, particularly in technology, energy, and defense. Increased Silicon Valley investment in Nigerian startups and strengthening military ties in West Africa, partly to counter Chinese influence, are cited as evidence that the U.S. recognizes the strategic disadvantage of restricting Nigerian entry. However, this shift is framed not as generosity, but as competition. China's investments in Nigerian infrastructure, railways, ports, digital networks, Russia's oil negotiations, and Turkey's educational initiatives are presented as motivating factors for the U.S. The proposed visa-free access is described metaphorically as America's Trojan horse, intended to attract Nigeria's talent towards the U.S. rather than China or Russia. This potential policy is not without critics. Warnings include overwhelming the U.S. system, accusations of it being a globalist loophole, and fears of it subtly altering America's labor force and demographics. A point of contention highlighted is the potential asymmetry. Nigerians could enter U.S. airports like JFK and LAX without visas, while U.S. citizens would still require visas for Nigeria. Whether viewed as a double standard or a strategic maneuver, Nigeria is positioned as a focal point of the immigration debate in 2025. This represents a significant alleged shift in policy. Number 9, Kenya. Following Nigeria, Kenya is presented as Africa's diplomatic sweetheart. In 2025, Kenyans could potentially gain visa-free access to the U.S., seen as a reward for Kenya's long-standing support of pro-Western alliances. Kenya has historically hosted American military bases, intelligence operations, and humanitarian projects. This potential visa change is portrayed as part of a larger strategy, using Kenya to counter Chinese and Iranian influence in East Africa. Kenya is thus positioned as a key partner for the U.S. Complicating factors are introduced. Kenya's young, ambitious population seeking opportunities raises concerns among critics that the visa deal could be exploited by economic migrants posing as tourists. Some conservative voices in the U.S. reportedly label it a silent amnesty. Within Kenya, there is said to be a mix of excitement about the opportunity and suspicion that the U.S. aims to drain Kenya's talent pool, leading to a brain drain. The underlying question posed is about the true nature of the relationship, characterized by mutual agendas but limited trust. Number 8. South Africa. South Africa is reportedly set to receive visa-free access to the U.S., described as a historic development. For years, South Africa has maintained a balance between its BRICS membership and ties with the United States. The proposed visa-free status in 2025 is framed as a U.S. effort to potentially weaken BRICS and strengthen relationships with pro-Western African nations. The U.S. purportedly views South Africa as a gateway to the continent, influential in finance, logistics, culture, and soft power. Hollywood's engagement and Wall Street's investments are cited as examples of U.S. interest. However, this move coincides with heightened racial tensions and immigration debates in the U.S. Granting visa-free travel to South Africa, a nation still addressing the legacy of apartheid and experiencing its own xenophobic challenges, is expected to be controversial. Opponents might argue that South Africa's own immigration management issues make unrestricted U.S. access questionable. Conversely, the rationale presented is that South Africa offers assets the U.S. values: advanced infrastructure, legal stability, and a growing black middle class aligned with American consumer culture. The decision is framed not just as a travel policy but as a political partnership solidifying Washington's influence. It is described as a move laden with controversy and strategic implications that could reshape U.S.-Africa relations. Number 7. Ghana. Ghana, often recognized for its democratic stability, peace, cultural contributions like Afrobeat music, and Pan-African identity, is allegedly included in the 2025 U.S. visa-free program. This inclusion, however, is presented with potential controversy. Positioning Ghana as a model African nation is seen by critics as potentially patronizing and selective, reinforcing a good African versus bad African dichotomy to serve U.S. geopolitical aims. With the growth of African American tourism and cultural repatriation movements, this visa deal might be viewed partly as a symbolic gesture to the diaspora. Serious concerns are also raised: the potential influx of Ghanaians arriving without visas and the challenge of managing those who might overstay, work illegally, or seek asylum due to internal issues in Ghana. The narrative suggests that the line between symbolic diplomacy and practical migration consequences could become blurred, leading to unpredictable outcomes despite potentially good intentions. The reality, it implies, might be more complex than anticipated. Number 6. Senegal. Senegal, traditionally an ally of both France and the U.S. and a stable presence in a volatile region, is said to be gaining visa-free access, strengthening its position as a bridge between Africa and the West. The U.S. purportedly sees Senegal as a new hub for West African diplomacy and a source of soft power to counter instability in Mali and Nigeria's growing influence. However, beneath this partnership, challenges exist. Senegal faces high youth unemployment, social unrest, and established migration networks. Warnings are mentioned that this visa-free policy could inadvertently facilitate undocumented migration, with individuals potentially overstaying visas or using family sponsorships to remain in the U.S. Skeptics suggest the policy may be less about friendship and more about securing U.S. access to fishing rights, mining resources, and military bases, adhering to the principle that nothing comes for free. Number 5. Rwanda. The inclusion of Rwanda on the alleged U.S. visa-free list for 2025 is presented as particularly striking, given the country's history of genocide and civil war. Rwanda transformation into a model of efficiency, often dubbed the Singapore of Africa, due to its clean streets, strong governance, and disciplined military, is acknowledged. However, this transformation is contrasted with criticism from human rights groups, who accuse the Rwandan government of authoritarian practices, suppressing political freedoms, and censoring media. Granting visa-free travel under these circumstances is framed as potentially problematic, prompting questions in the U.S. about opening borders to nations with questionable democratic records. The script suggests the primary motivation is optics. Rwanda presents an image of modernity, stability, and investment readiness, which is deemed sufficient by Washington in a turbulent world. This decision is labeled shocking, raising concerns about the perceived price of stability. Number 4. Uganda. Uganda, a country known in the U.S. partly for its controversial laws, is also allegedly slated for visa-free access. The rationale provided is Uganda's close cooperation with the U.S. on counter-terrorism, regional peacekeeping, and intelligence sharing. This cooperation allows the U.S. to overlook domestic issues to maintain influence in the Great Lakes region. This decision is predicted to generate significant backlash. Progressive activists in the U.S. are expected to be outraged by granting access to a country that criminalizes LGBTQ+ individuals. Conversely, conservative voices might question granting this privilege to another country perceived as having a high migration risk. Uganda's potential visa-free status is described as one of the most potentially explosive and strategically calculated decisions on the list. Number 3. Morocco. Morocco's inclusion in the alleged visa-free plan is primarily attributed to strategic geography. Morocco serves as a vital link between Europe, the Arab world, and sub-Saharan Africa. The growing cooperation between the U.S., Israel, and Morocco is presented as a factor, with the visa-free status seen as a reward for Morocco's normalization deal with Israel and a way for the U.S. to solidify its presence in North Africa. Controversies are noted: Morocco's tense relationship with Algeria, the ongoing dispute over Western Sahara, and internal pressures for reform. Granting Moroccans visa-free entry could potentially exacerbate regional tensions or involve the U.S. more deeply in existing conflicts. It is also interpreted as sending a signal to other Arab states that alignment with Washington brings tangible benefits. Number 2. Botswana. Botswana, described as quietly stable and often underrated, is allegedly included due to its good governance, low corruption, and Western-aligned economic model. The country possesses wealth in diamonds and wildlife and potential in clean energy. Visa-free access is framed as a U.S. acknowledgement and endorsement of Botswana's path, aimed partly at securing access to its resources. The deeper implication suggested is strategic, securing one of Africa's few stable mineral corridors before competitors like China can. While Botswana may not generate major headlines, its inclusion is presented as indicative of U.S. strategic resource interests. Number 1. Mauritius. The final country listed is Mauritius, a small island nation associated with international finance, banking, and offshore business, billionaires, banks, and backdoor deals. It is characterized as a tax haven, a hub for shell corporations, and an emerging tech center. The visa-free access for Mauritius is primarily aimed at facilitating investor movement rather than general tourism or migration. The alleged U.S. goal is to develop Mauritius into a financial hub analogous to the Cayman Islands, but focused on Africa. The emphasis is on the movement of capital. The overarching policy and conclusion: the script introduces an alleged new policy for 2025, the Continental Strategic Visa Waiver Initiative. Attributed to the U.S. State Department and Homeland Security, this initiative purportedly allows countries with strong U.S. relations, high traveler integrity, and strategic alliances to bypass standard visa procedures. While presented publicly as modernization, it is described internally as a geopolitical tool enabling the U.S. to grant or withhold freedom of movement based on cooperation. This policy is expected to be highly controversial. The narrative concludes that the underlying issue is not merely about visas but about a broader strategic vision where Africa is selectively engaged based on U.S. interests. Mobility is framed as a tool, even a weapon, to shape alliances. The script suggests mainstream news reporting will highlight the 10 countries gaining access but may not fully explore the beneficiaries, detractors, or the societal divisions this policy could create in the U.S. The video encourages viewers to take action. Share the video, implying the information presented offers a perspective not widely available. Comment with opinions on whether the policy is sound or a risky experiment. Subscribe for more content presenting uncomfortable truths. Remain aware, critical, and vocal, suggesting that public scrutiny is necessary for policies potentially decided privately. This serves as a wake-up call to the audience. Thanks for watching.